Hello, my name is Declan Quigley of Anamnaska Shamanism.
And I'm Eileen McCourt, spiritual author and teacher.
Today in the Nature Of series, we'll be looking at the nature of Christianity. For some, this may be a challenging topic, but we believe as spiritual seekers that we must have the truth and the facts must come out. Eileen, as a historian, what is the story of Christianity?
There are two stories here, Declan. There is the story of Christianity, where it began, Christianity as we know it, what are the origins of it, where did that begin, and the story that Christianity adopted, where did that come from, where did that begin? So we have two stories here. And I'm going to start with the story that Christianity adopted for itself. That's where I'm going to start. And I'm going to confine this to very 5 precise and concise points. Point number 1. The ancient civilizations, thousands of years before the supposed life of Jesus, those ancient civilizations revered and honoured the sun. They called it the Son of God, S-U-N of God, because it was their God to them. It brought them light every morning. It brought them life, as in the crops. And in the winter, when the sun was perceived to die, the crops died with it. And when the sun was perceived to come back again in spring, the crops returned again. So they honoured and revered this sun, as well as the planets around which the sun revolved. And they gave them names. They personified them. For example, we had Mithra in Persia, Krishna in India, Hessus for the Celts, Horus for Egypt, and Christianity, for them it was Jesus. Point number 2, Declan. All those gods I've just mentioned, Krishna, Mithra, Horus, Hessus, they all share the same CV. They were all born of virgins. They all died and were resurrected again, saving mankind, saviour gods. And Jesus is the most recent in a long line of saviour gods. Point number 3. If all these civilizations, the ancient ones, who did not know each other and were not in contact with each other, if they all carried the same story, then there must have been a common origin or a common thinking behind that story. And yes, there was. And where is that origin? It's in the stars. The ancient people studied the stars, astronomy, astrology. The study of the stars for them made sense of the universe around them. For example, they knew when the Nile was going to flood, their irrigation was coming. They knew when to sow the seeds. They knew when to harvest the crop. And ancient mariners and seamen, the only way they could find the direction was by studying the stars, following the stars. Now, point number 4. In studying the stars and the movements of the planets, they built up myths and stories around the relationships of those stars and planets to each other. And there is where they have the origin, not just mythology, but astro-mythology. And let's specify and name some of these stars. We've got up in the east, the brightest star is the star called Sirius. Everybody can see it, it's there for everybody to see. That is the star in the east. The east is where the Son of God rises, S-U-N. Up above that we have got the Orion belt. And in the Orion belt there are 3 specific bright stars, 1, 2 and 3 just placed next to each other. And those 3 stars in that Orion belt are called today the same name they were called in ancient times. And that name, Declan, is the 3 kings, or the Magi. There you have the story. The 3 kings going to visit Jesus, the Son of God, born in the east, and they follow the star to get there. We have another star system in the southern hemisphere, and that is called the Southern Cross. The sun rises and in the east, and it dies for 3 days. These stories were all built around the natural cycle of the earth. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. 21st of December is the shortest day. So that was seen as the day on which the sun died. That's the winter solstice. And the word solstice means sol, sun, stice, standing still. So the sun was perceived to stand still for 3 days from the 21st of December. And the area it was perceived to stand still in was the area of the Southern Cross constellation. So there's the story even further. The sun rose in the east, it died on the cross, and it rose again 3 days later. There's the story, the astro-mythological story that has trundled down through history for centuries after centuries after centuries, and was there thousands of years before Jesus was supposed to be here.
How do you know all this, Eileen?
Well, Declan, it's there for everybody to see. Number one, the stars can be seen. Those who study astronomy, it's there. The Orion Belt, Sirius, they're all there for everybody to see. And these nights are very bright, so it's very obvious these nights. How do I know all this? We have literature and we have historical documents to tell us all this. For example, what I've just talked about there, the star astrology, it's all in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It's all in the coffin scripts, it's all in the pyramid scripts, the Vedas and the Sanskrit writings. That's where we're getting all this information from. These ancient scripts, these ancient writings. So we're not making anything up. It's all there for everybody to read. Point number 5. I've just explained the origins of the story on which Christianity was based. Now I'm going to explain the origins of Christianity itself. And the origins of Christianity, well, where did they come from? The Romans invented Christianity. The Romans, under the Flavian dynasty, 69 to 96 Common Era. That's when Christianity began. And when were the Gospels written? Same time. So they just fit very nicely into the Roman Flavian dynasty. They are the ones who created Christianity. And why did they do that? As a form of propaganda, Roman propaganda, against the Jewish troublesome peoples in the Jewish territories, Judea, etc., that the Romans occupied and who were rebelling and causing a lot of trouble. The Jewish people were waiting for a Messiah, not a spiritual or religious Messiah, but a military Messiah. And there was rebellion after rebellion after rebellion. And this Roman propaganda is very obvious in the Gospels. For example, we've got Jesus wandering around telling people to pay your taxes to Caesar. Is that not Roman propaganda? We have got Paul in the Acts talking about government institutions are sent to us by God, they're here for our good, they love us, and we have to obey their laws and rules. Is that not Roman propaganda? We have got Jesus wandering around telling people, love your enemies, do good to them who hate and persecute you, turn the other cheek. Is that not Roman propaganda? In the Gospels, the Romans always come up every time smelling of roses. It's the Jews who are made the baddies. Even the example or the episode where the Roman officer asks Jesus or sends to Jesus to come and help to raise him or to heal his servant. The Jews who go to Jesus describe the Roman officer as a wonderful man. He loves our people. He's built a synagogue for us. Look what's happening there. Making the Romans come up smelling of roses. And of course, the big one, the big episode is the trial of Jesus. It's the Jews who keep crying out, crucify him, crucify him. And here we have Pontius Pilate running around washing his hands, trying to get Jesus to go back in his word so he can save him. And I don't see anything wrong with this man. I don't see any reason to crucify him. We have the Romans again smelling of roses and the Jews being the criminals. Despite the fact that Romans, it was a Roman persecution, crucifixion that was inflicted on Jesus. That was a Roman punishment. If the Jews really were trying to persecute him, they would have stoned him. Crucifixion was a Roman punishment for sedition. So, Declan, we have Christianity. You've asked about the origins. The origins lie with the Romans. And Christianity itself is merely a rehash of Judaism, which is really a rehash of the ancient Egyptian beliefs that we just talked about in the astrological tales. So really, Christianity is simply a rehash of what we call the old paganism. The pagans whom Christianity defeated and castigated as heathens and undesirables, but the very same pagans whose ceremonial sites Christianity took over and proceeded to build their own churches on, because they knew that those pagan ceremonial sites were built on the natural energy lines of the earth, the ley lines of the earth. Go into any Christian church, Declan, go into the Vatican, and you will see all around you all the old pagan symbols. It's simply a rehash under a new name. And the only thing new about Christianity is the name. Christianity is new in name only. It's the most recent religion, really very recent religion, but it's not new. It's new in name. It is simply a rehash of the old Judaism, which was a rehash of the old Egyptian beliefs.
So, Eileen, taking all that you've said into consideration, was there an actual person called Jesus?
Did Jesus actually exist? Is what you are asking me. Can I read you something first of all? This was said by Pope Leo X in 1514 and recorded by his secretary, Pietro Cardinal Bembo. And this is what he wrote. This is what Leo said. How well we know what a profitable superstition this fable of Christ has been for us and our predecessors. Now that, Declan, was said by Pope Leo X at a lavish Easter Friday banquet in the Vatican in 1514. He raised the chalice up, and that is what he said. That's coming from the highest of the hierarchy in the Christian church. The very, very, very top. You can't go any higher than the Pope. That's what he said. So you've just asked me, did Jesus really exist? Well, I just explained that the Romans created Christianity and they invented the character of Jesus, which was a common name in those days. It wasn't an extraordinary name, it was a common name. They invented the character of Jesus as their God-man to spearhead this new religion that they had brought in to control the Jewish peoples. Now, the story that we read about in the Gospels is not the story of a man called Jesus. It's the story of the Son of God, S-U-N, in the old rehashed versions. There may well have been a Jesus wandering around preaching as the new Messiah. There may well have been a Jesus as such. We don't know. How can we be certain? Well, we can't even sort out who killed Kennedy yet. That's only 50 years ago. So it's 2,000 years ago. There may well have been a Jesus, but it's not his story that is being told in the Gospels. The story being told in the Gospels is the story of the Son of God, virgin birth, death and resurrection as a Saviour God. Now, that old story was astrotheologically based. All of those stories of the gods were all astro-mythological. In other words, myths. They did not really happen. The story of Jesus, as the latest of them, is also belonging in mythology. But what the Romans did, they took it out of the field of mythological literature and placed it into the field of history by bringing in a real man called Jesus, a real name, and building the story around him. But it does not belong in the field of history. The Gospels are not historical records. They are mythological literature. They belong in the field of literature. Now, there is no historian. If you have this wonder man called Jesus wandering around raising people from the dead, multiplying loaves and fishes, walking on water, all this kind of thing, then why is there no historian of the time who tells us about him? obviously because he did not exist. You will not find the Jesus for whom you're looking. You will not find him in the canonical Gospels. He's not there. You will find him in the other Gospels we have, which were hidden from us and kept secret, the Nag Hammadi scripts, and there he is known as Yeshua, a simple, ordinary Essene member, wandering around teaching and healing, but he was not performing miracles. And the difference in those Nag Hammadi scripts and the canonical Gospels is simply, in the canonical Gospels we have the story of this wonder God and replicating the lives of all the other gods. Whereas in the Nag Hammadi scripts we have no life story. There is no son, there's no story of the Son of God. It's all the esoteric teachings which have been kept from us. And that's why the Nag Hammadi Gospels had to be hidden, because they were under threat of being purged and being burned by the Romans, who wanted their story put out to control the Jewish people.
If Christianity belongs in the realm of mythology, why then, after 2,000 years, is it still the most prominent religion on the planet?
Because number one, Declan, most people who profess to be Christians have never read the Gospels for themselves. The Gospels being the very foundation stone on which Christianity is based. Most people haven't read them. Isn't that amazing? Most people haven't read them. We just simply have heard what we have been told. And we've only been told what they want us to hear. And secondly, to answer your question, why is Christianity so powerful? Because, Declan, if you have enemies and you have people who do not agree with you, and you get rid of them all, then there comes a time when you have nobody else left in opposition. It's very easy to be the victor and write your story when you've killed everybody else around you and got rid of them because they objected to you. Does that answer the question? Number one, people haven't read the Gospels, and number two, the church got rid of all opposition ruthlessly. Ruthlessly, Declan. No opposition tolerated whatsoever. Look at Galileo and Copernicus in the Middle Ages, who were bringing out the truth that the earth revolved around the sun. What happened then? Persecuted. Persecution by churches right down through the ages. Any opposition was got rid of. There's your answer.
So Eileen, could you give us a brief summary of what we've discussed today?
A brief summary, okay. We have said, and I've specified and I have explained, that Christianity as we know it is simply a rehash of the old Judaism, which was a rehash of the old Egyptian beliefs, which were around for thousands of years before the supposed life of Jesus. And I've explained that the story on which Christianity was based comes from the astrotheological, mythological tales of centuries before, thousands of years before Jesus appeared in the scene. And you asked me, did Jesus exist? I've told you, you will not find Jesus in the canonical Gospels. That's not where you will find him, because that man is simply a rehash of the other gods. Virgin birth, death, resurrection as a saviour God. You will find the Yeshua you are looking for in the Nag Hammadi scripts, where there is no story of the Son of God rising. There we have all the esoteric teachings, the teachings we need to know on our spiritual journey to get us to enlightenment, which have been kept hidden from us, but which now have been unearthed. That's where you will find the Jesus you are looking for. He's called Yeshua. He's an Essene. He's a simple teacher and preacher. He is not a miracle worker, because that Jesus in the Gospel doing all those miracles did not exist.
Well, thanks for watching, and I hope you found that stimulating. Next week, we'll be talking about the nature of Kundalini energy. Namaste.
So I hope you'll join us next week again, and until we meet again, namaste.